You think Christmas desserts were always store-bought fruitcakes and instant pudding mixes? Think again. American kitchens in the 1960s and 70s created some of the most inventive holiday sweets ever baked, treats that have since vanished from our tables. Let's dig into 60 Christmas desserts that have disappeared. Leaving turkey drippings for everything was one of those old-fashioned habits Grandma refused to give up, and the truth was that every dish on the table tasted better because of it. After the turkey finished roasting and she transferred it to the carving board, she would tilt the pan and pour every last bit of liquid gold into a jar or small bowl, letting the fat rise to the top. She knew exactly how to use it, spooning the fat into her cast-iron skillet to flavor vegetables, potatoes, or stuffing with that unmistakable richness that no bottled seasoning could ever imitate. The darker juices beneath the fat became the base for her gravy, deepening the flavor in ways only slow-roasted drippings could. She used them to moisten leftover turkey the next day, keeping it tender and soft instead of letting it dry out. She even saved some for future meals, adding a teaspoon here and there to soups or casseroles in the weeks that followed, stretching the flavor of Thanksgiving long after the holiday ended. No part of that turkey went to waste, not while Grandma was in charge. The drippings were her secret ingredient, the hidden thread that tied every dish together. It was one more sign of her resourcefulness, her skill, and her belief that good food should never be thrown away. Using those drippings was not just practical. It was tradition, memory, and pride simmered into every bite. It was one of the many reasons her Thanksgiving tasted perfect every single year. Grape ambrosia was the cool, creamy fruit dessert that once appeared next to pies, salads, and puddings on Thanksgiving buffets. Made from grapes, whipped cream, coconut, and sometimes nuts or marshmallows, it brought a refreshing sweetness to the table. Children loved the burst of grapes under the cream. Adults appreciated how light it felt after a heavy meal. It was a dish you could prepare ahead of time, chilled in the refrigerator while the real cooking took over the kitchen. In the 1960s and 1970s, it was practically expected at large family gatherings, the sort of dish that brought color and comfort to the buffet. But as dessert trends grew richer and more elaborate, grape ambrosia faded. People wanted bold flavors, not gentle ones. Yet those who tasted it remember the softness, the sweetness, and the sense of ease it brought to an otherwise crowded holiday. Brown beans and fried taters were the quiet backbone of many hillbilly Thanksgivings, especially in homes where simple food meant everything. The beans simmered low with salt and maybe a bit of fat, turning creamy as they cooked and filling the kitchen with a gentle, earthy aroma. The potatoes sizzled in a skillet until the edges crisped and browned, popping softly as they hit the hot grease. Together they made a meal that warmed the body and steadied the heart, the kind of food that reminded families what real comfort tasted like. Some households served them as a starter, others as part of the main meal, but in every home they were welcomed with gratitude. Families served them before the main meal or right beside it, grateful for food that filled stomachs without costing much. As Thanksgiving traditions grew richer, brown beans and taters slipped into the background, but their comfort never faded, especially for anyone who still knows the taste of a meal built from patience instead of price. Pinto bean pie was a salad doubled as dessert during the 1950s, when gelatin molds graced every holiday table and cost mere pennies to prepare. A single box of flavored gelatin could be stretched with canned fruit, nuts, and whipped topping to serve 8 or more people generously. Red and green versions made natural Christmas centerpieces, their jewel-like colors glowing under dining room lights. Children loved the wobble and jiggle, while adults appreciated the light sweetness after heavy holiday meals. The molds required only hot water to dissolve the gelatin, then refrigeration overnight to set. Cottage cheese or cream cheese mixed in created richer variations that seemed almost like cheesecake. Families competed to create the most elaborate molds, layering colors and adding suspended fruits that looked like edible artwork. Jell-O salad proved that affordable could still be beautiful, festive, and absolutely delicious to a generation raised on its wiggly charm. Peaches were jeweled accompaniments that appeared beside Christmas hams, their spiced sweetness providing perfect counterpoint to rich meats. Canned peach halves were simmered in syrup infused with whole cloves, cinnamon sticks, and apple cider vinegar until they absorbed warm spices completely. The peaches emerged tender and glossy, their golden flesh tinged with amber from the spiced brine. Packed into jars, they could be preserved for months, ready to grace holiday tables whenever needed. Each peach half was studded with whole cloves, making them look almost decorative, edible ornaments for the dinner plate. The flavor was complex, simultaneously sweet, tart, and warmly spiced in ways that elevated simple sliced ham. Grandmothers often made these in late summer when fresh peaches were cheap, though canned versions worked nearly as well. Pickled peaches represented the tradition of putting up preserves, ensuring summer's sweetness could brighten even the darkest winter meals. Sweet jar of filling represented tradition and thrift combined in 9-inch pastry. A jar of prepared mincemeat for 59 cents was poured into a pie crust and baked until bubbling, creating a dense, spiced dessert that tasted like concentrated Christmas. The filling was dark and mysterious, packed with dried fruits, spices, and sometimes a hint of brandy that made it feel sophisticated and adult. Children often rejected mincemeat pie entirely, leaving more for grown-ups who remembered it from their own childhoods. The pie kept well and actually improved after a day or two, making it perfect for Thanksgiving when desserts needed to be prepared ahead. Some families served it with hard sauce or vanilla ice cream, but most ate it plain with coffee after the dishes were cleared. This wasn't the most popular pie on the table, but its presence signaled tradition and connection to previous generations who had made these same choices. Cream pie was once the steady savior of holiday meals, a dessert every Southern household kept on hand because it never let anyone down. Made from sugar, butter, eggs, and a splash of vinegar or lemon, it baked into a dense golden filling with a soft crackle on top. Families turned to it when times were thin, knowing they could make something sweet from ingredients already in the pantry. Its flavor was warm, rich, and comforting, with a tang that made each bite feel special. For many, chess pie tasted like childhood and crowded dinner tables during cold nights. But as Thanksgiving desserts grew flashier and more elaborate, this simple pie slipped to the background. People chose taller pies, fancier toppings, and long ingredient lists. Yet anyone who has eaten chess pie warm from the oven knows its honesty is what makes it timeless. Hummingbird cake was once a pecan pie was the Depression-era dessert that refused to give up sweetness. When real pecans were too expensive, cooks used oats, breadcrumbs, or crushed crackers instead. Mixed with brown sugar and syrup, the filling baked into a chewy, caramel-like layer that mimicked the flavor and texture of the real thing. The crust was often handmade, rolled thin to save flour, but still tender from lard or shortening. For many, it wasn't just a substitute. It was a small act of defiance against scarcity. Families cut into it proudly, knowing they'd turned less into something that felt like enough. Mock pecan pie was the proof that celebration could exist even when times were hard. Though forgotten today, it once symbolized resilience baked golden brown. Caramel. Let's dig into 30 lost Christmas desserts America completely forgot. Fruitcake with suet was once the undisputed king of Christmas desserts, baked weeks in advance and aged like fine wine in American pantries. The recipe called for beef suet, hard fat from around the kidneys, which gave the cake an incomparably moist texture that butter could not replicate. Dried fruits were soaked in brandy for days before being folded into dense batter, heavy with molasses and spices. The cakes were wrapped in cheesecloth soaked in spirits and stored in cool cellars, developing deeper flavor each week. Families served thin slices alongside coffee after Christmas dinner, the richness demanding moderation. The suet kept the cake fresh for months, practical for households without reliable refrigeration. Children wrinkled their noses at the dense texture, but adults understood this was celebration food meant to last. Today, fruitcake survives mostly as a punchline, but the suet-laden original was magnificent. Mahogany cake earned its name from the rich, dark color produced by combining chocolate and spices in a single batter. Unlike pure chocolate cakes, mahogany cake included warming spices like cinnamon, cloves, and sometimes coffee that gave it remarkable depth. The chocolate was typically cocoa powder rather than melted chocolate, creating a lighter texture that let the spices shine through. Brown sugar and molasses contributed to both the color and the distinctive flavor, adding caramel undertones that made each bite interesting. The cake was often frosted with chocolate or mocha buttercream, or sometimes a simple chocolate glaze that enhanced its glossy appearance. Mahogany cake represented the sophisticated side of 1950s holiday baking, a dessert for adults who appreciated nuance over simple sweetness. The combination of chocolate and spice was unusual enough to spark conversation at gatherings. Today, this cake has been largely forgotten, replaced by simpler chocolate recipes that lack its distinctive character. Apple cider bought by the gallon jug became the beverage that made water feel festive and special. A gallon of cider for 79 cents provided drinks for the entire day, served cold before dinner, and heated with cinnamon sticks for evening dessert. The cider tasted like autumn itself, sweet and slightly tangy, with flavors that complemented turkey and pie perfectly. Children could drink unlimited amounts without mothers worrying about sugar the way they did with soda, making it the rare treat that came without restrictions or guilt. Some families added cinnamon sticks and whole cloves when heating it, filling homes with spice scents that made everything smell like celebration. The cider bridged the gap between adult beverages and childhood drinks, sophisticated enough for grown-ups but sweet enough for children. This was economy and festivity combined, turning apple juice into something that felt appropriate for special occasions without requiring champagne budgets or cocktail skills. Slice cake was a holiday surprise wrapped inside a dessert, dense and chewy with bursts of candied orange that lit up every bite. People loved making it because it felt playful, different from the usual pies and puddings. The chopped orange candy slices melted slightly in the oven, blending with nuts, coconut, and a rich batter to create a texture unlike anything else on the table. Children always recognized the taste immediately, since those little orange candies were a rare treat any other time of year. Families baked this cake weeks in advance because the flavor deepened as it sat, becoming richer and more complex with every passing day. It was the kind of dessert that made people smile before they even tasted it. But as candy companies changed their recipes and holiday traditions shifted towards simpler desserts, orange slice cake faded away. It was too old-fashioned, too sweet, too heavy for modern tastes, and eventually it disappeared from cookbooks and memories alike. Still, for anyone who grew up eating it, the flavor remains unforgettable. A cheerful dessert from a different time. Choux hoe cakes were the crisp, golden griddle cakes that showed up on Thanksgiving tables long before yeast rolls took over. Made from cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, they sizzled in hot grease until the edges turned lacy and brown. The first one off the pan was always eaten by whoever stood closest, too tempting to wait for the rest. Hoe cakes had a way of soaking up gravy, broth, or syrup, making them versatile enough to sit beside almost any holiday dish. They were quick to make, cheap to prepare, and beloved because they tasted like the cornfields that sustained so many mountain families. As store-bought bread and fancier sides grew popular, hoe cakes were pushed aside, treated like everyday food instead of holiday fare. But for those who remember them, nothing else brings back the taste of a fire-warmed kitchen quite the same way. Cream appeared like magic after winter storms, requiring nothing more than fresh fallen snow, sugar, vanilla, and milk or cream. Children would rush outside with large bowls to gather clean snow, while mothers prepared the simple mixture inside the warm kitchen. The snow was folded gently into sweetened vanilla milk, creating instant soft serve that tasted like frozen wonder and winter itself. The dessert cost essentially nothing and could only be made during those special snowy days, making it feel even more precious and exciting. Families developed their own secret recipes, some adding cocoa for chocolate snow cream or canned fruit for fruity variations. The ice cream had to be eaten immediately before it melted, creating a flurry of happy spoons and sticky faces around the kitchen table. Snow ice cream connected children to the weather and the season in ways store-bought treats never. Fig cake celebrated the sweet, honey-flavored fruit that grew abundantly across the southern United States during the 1950s. Home gardeners often had more figs than they could possibly eat fresh, so canning and preserving them became essential skills. Fig preserves were folded into spiced cake batter, creating a moist, dense cake with pockets of fruit throughout. The figs contributed natural sweetness along with a distinctive flavor that nothing else could replicate. Cream cheese frosting or simple powdered sugar glaze provided contrast to the rich, spiced crumb. Some bakers used dried figs that had been plumped in brandy, adding another layer of complexity to the flavor profile. Fig cake was often made from trees that had been in families for generations, connecting the dessert to place and heritage. The cakes were served at Christmas gatherings where guests compared whose fig tree produced the sweetest fruit. Today, fresh figs are expensive and scarce, making this once common cake a rare treasure. Eggs stretched with milk and margarine fed entire extended families from a single 5-pound bag costing 39 cents. The potatoes were peeled, boiled until tender, then mashed with whatever dairy was available, usually cheap margarine and reconstituted powdered milk that cost almost nothing. Mothers whipped the potatoes with electric beaters, adding extra milk to increase volume until the bowl looked like it could feed a small army. The result was fluffy and mild, the perfect canvas for soaking up giblet gravy and turkey drippings. Children created wells in their potatoes, specifically designed to hold as much gravy as possible without spilling onto the rest of the plate. Some families added cream cheese when someone brought it as a contribution, elevating the dish into something almost luxurious. These weren't gourmet potatoes, but they were reliable, filling, and cheap enough that seconds and thirds were always encouraged throughout the meal. It was once a classic centerpiece dessert, the kind made when someone really wanted to show off their best baking skills. The cake layers were soft and buttery, but the true magic was the caramel glaze made on the stovetop. It bubbled slowly until thick and glossy, then was poured over the cake while still hot, carrying chopped pecans across the top like little jewels. The glaze hardened just slightly as it cooled, turning each slice into a perfect balance of crunch and softness. Holiday tables welcomed it proudly, before store-bought caramel toppings and boxed cakes pushed it aside. People used to gather around the kitchen to watch the caramel come together, knowing it could burn in a heartbeat if you turned away. That kind of dessert required attention, care, and a quiet hour at the stove, things fewer homes had time for. But those who remember it can still hear that soft caramel drip down the sides and feel the warmth of a cake made with genuine effort. Meringue-topped banana pudding was the special. Fried okra with a cornmeal crust was the crispy, golden side that completed countless hillbilly Thanksgiving plates. Fresh okra was sliced thin, tossed in seasoned cornmeal, and fried until the edges curled and the centers stayed tender. It made a soft crackle when you bit into it, releasing a flavor that tasted like a summer garden preserved for the holidays. Families served it alongside ham, turkey, or beans, and it always vanished fast. Okra grew well in mountain soil, and frying it became a beloved way to honor the harvest even as winter approached. But as frozen vegetables and packaged sides became easier, fried okra slowly disappeared from the Thanksgiving menu. Those who remember its crunch still think of it as comfort food at its finest. These cookies spread their spicy fragrance through 1950s kitchens during the weeks leading up to Christmas, made from ingredients that cost almost nothing. Molasses was far cheaper than refined sugar and gave cookies a deep, complex sweetness that plain sugar could never match. The dough combined molasses with flour, lard or shortening, ginger, cinnamon, and a touch of baking soda that made them puff and crack beautifully. Rolled in sugar before baking, each cookie emerged with a crackled top and chewy center that improved over several days of storage. Children helped cut shapes with drinking glasses when cookie cutters were unavailable. Pressing pie, made from a 29-cent can of Libby's pumpkin filling, became the dessert that defined Thanksgiving for an entire generation of children. The filling was mixed with evaporated milk, eggs, sugar, and pumpkin pie spice, then poured into a store-bought pie crust and baked until set. The result was smooth, spiced, and sweet, with that distinctive canned pumpkin flavor that everyone recognized as the taste of the holiday. Mothers could make 2 pies from a single can when they rolled the crust thin and didn't overfill. stretching dessert to feed a crowd. Children would fight over who got the slice with the most whipped topping, which was usually Cool Whip from a tub rather than fresh whipped cream. The pie was served barely warm, cut into thin slices that somehow still satisfied despite their size. This wasn't fancy French pastry, but it was the taste of tradition that made Thanksgiving feel complete and familiar year after year. Ambrosia salad. Sweet corn soufflé was a cloud-baked golden, a dish that seemed to float straight from the oven to the table. The batter began with creamed corn and butter, thickened slightly, and then folded with whipped egg whites until it shimmered like silk. When it baked, it rose tall and trembling, the edges crisping gently while the center stayed soft and full of steam. The smell was warm and sweet, a perfume of corn and cream that filled the kitchen like a promise. Each spoonful melted instantly, light, buttery, and faintly sweet, carrying the taste of summer harvest into winter. It was a dish that required timing and trust, fragile enough to fall if left too long, but worth every second of patience. In the 1940s and 1950s, it was considered refined yet comforting, a touch of elegance on the family table. Children watched it rise like magic through the oven glass, gasping when it came out glowing and proud. Served beside turkey, ham, or roast beef, it offered a gentler kind of richness, one that felt like home dressed for company. Sweet corn soufflé was joy in motion, the fleeting kind of beauty that vanished soon after it was made. Light as air, golden as memory, and impossible not to love. Grape salad with sour cream and brown sugar was the cool, unexpected elegance of a Midwest Thanksgiving. It appeared in the 1950s and 1960s when homemakers began experimenting with recipes that required no baking yet still dazzled at the table. Green and red grapes were washed, dried, and tossed in thick, tangy sour cream. A generous sprinkle of brown sugar melted slowly over the top, forming a delicate caramel-like crust as it chilled in the refrigerator. Sometimes crushed pecans or walnuts were added for a touch of crunch. Served in cut glass bowls, it shimmered like a dessert and tasted like one too. Sweet, tart, and creamy all at once. It was the kind of dish that made guests pause mid-bite, surprised at how something so simple could taste so rich. It brought freshness to a meal often dominated by heaviness, a bright counterpoint to gravy and stuffing. For many, it was the first salad they ever truly loved. It fit perfectly into the era's fascination with sweet, savory blends and convenience cooking, beautiful without effort. Over the decades, it disappeared from most holiday tables, outshined by trendier desserts. Yet for those who remember, one spoonful of grape salad is enough to recall the laughter of long tables, clinking glasses, and the sweet ease of family gathered close. Dump cake earned its name from the effortless method, literally dumping ingredients into a pan and letting the oven do all the work. A can of fruit pie filling spread across the bottom, topped with dry cake mix straight from the box, then dotted with butter. As it baked, the butter melted through the cake mix, creating a cobbler-like topping over bubbling fruit. The whole thing cost less than $1 and required no mixing bowls, measuring cups, or baking expertise whatsoever. Cherry pie filling with white cake mix became a Christmas classic, its red and white layers looking almost deliberately festive. Families short on time or energy found dump cake a lifesaver during the hectic holiday season. Served warm with vanilla ice cream, it rivaled far more complicated desserts in satisfaction. Dump cake proved that sometimes the simplest approach produced the most beloved results around the holiday table. Prune Whip nut cake was a regional treasure showcasing wild nuts gathered from American forests each autumn. In areas where hickory trees grew abundantly, families spent fall weekends cracking notoriously hard shells to extract small, intensely flavored nut meats. The nuts had richer, more complex flavor than commercial walnuts or pecans, with slight bitterness perfect for baking. The cake was typically butter-rich pound cake or spice cake, with hickory nuts folded into batter and pressed onto frosting. Some recipes called for brown sugar or caramel frosting, complementing the nuts' earthy sweetness. Gathering and cracking hickory nuts was communal activity, with families sharing labor and bounty. The cakes carried connection to land, and seasons that store-bought ingredients could never replicate. Today, hickory nuts are rarely seen in markets, making this once common Christmas cake nearly impossible to recreate. Apple stack cake emerged from Appalachian town, and serve rolls brushed with butter were one of those small details Grandma understood better than anyone because she knew the simplest things could become special with the right touch. She opened the package hours before the meal, separating the rolls gently so they could breathe a little. The kitchen was already warm from everything else, but she always made room for those rolls, sliding them onto the middle rack with practiced ease while they baked. She melted butter on the stove until it turned glossy and fragrant. When the rolls came out golden and lightly crisp, she brushed them generously, each stroke adding a shine that made them look far fancier than they were. Kids always tried to sneak one, tugging at the corners while steam curled out, filling the room with warm bread. Grandma pretended to scold them, but she always smiled because she loved that something so simple brought so much excitement. The rolls were never dry, never forgotten, always soft in the middle and crisp on top. It was a small thing, but that small thing helped the whole meal feel complete. Grandma knew perfection lived in tiny touches, and those rolls were one of them. Cellarettes with orange glaze were the sunshine of the Thanksgiving table, a dish that glowed as brightly as the spirit of the day itself. Slender carrots, peeled and sliced, were simmered gently with butter, brown sugar, and a splash of orange juice until tender and glossy. As the syrup reduced, it coated every piece in a golden sheen, the fragrance of citrus and caramel drifting through the kitchen. Housewives of the 1940s and 1950s adored this recipe, not just for its beauty, but for the optimism it brought to the table. It symbolized better days after years of rationing and scarcity. The vibrant orange mirrored the era's fascination with color, abundance, and cheer. Served in sparkling glass bowls or Pyrex dishes, the carrots caught the light like jewels, a touch of brightness among the earthy tones of the feast. Children loved their sweetness. Adults appreciated their elegance. They offered a reminder that simple ingredients could still create wonder. As tastes grew more complex, this humble side faded from modern menus. But in its time, candied carrots with orange glaze represented hope, sweet, steady, and radiant, the kind of joy that came from turning the ordinary into something beautiful. Despite its rich flavor and beloved status, has faced competition from newer, more fashionable desserts that cater to evolving tastes and dietary restrictions. The cake's traditional recipe, which includes a dense, sweet coconut pecan frosting, may not align with current trends toward lighter, less sugary desserts. Additionally, the misconception about its origin, it's American, not German, and the increasing preference for global flavors have also contributed to its reduced prominence in the dessert landscape. Nonetheless, German chocolate cake's decline has not erased its legacy. It remains a nostalgic favorite for many, underscoring the potential for adaptation to today's more health-conscious and flavor-diverse dessert market. Cottage pudding was the simplest of cakes topped with the richest of sauces, proving that humble ingredients could become something memorable and special. The cake itself was a basic yellow batter: flour, sugar, butter, eggs, and milk, baked in a square pan until golden and springy to the touch. But the magic happened when warm sauce was poured generously over each serving, transforming plain cake into something approaching decadence. Lemon sauce made from sugar, butter, and fresh lemon juice was the most common, its tartness cutting through the cake's sweetness perfectly. Chocolate sauce turned it into something children begged for repeatedly, while butterscotch made adults close their eyes in pleasure. The cake cost almost nothing to make. The sauce required only pantry staples, yet together they created a dessert worthy of any holiday table or special occasion. Cottage pudding proved that presentation and a good sauce could elevate the most basic cake into true celebration. Waldorf cake was an elegant chocolate layer cake that carried the prestige of its famous New York hotel namesake. The cake featured rich chocolate layers frosted with a cooked chocolate frosting that was smoother and more refined than simple buttercream. Chopped pecans or walnuts were folded into the frosting or pressed onto the sides, adding texture and earthiness to the sophisticated chocolate. Some versions included a red velvet-style coloring, connecting it to that famous cake also associated with the Waldorf Astoria. The frosting required cooking sugar, milk, and chocolate together until thickened, then beating until spreadable, a technique that demanded attention and skill. Waldorf cake represented aspirational baking, a chance for home cooks to create something with big city sophistication. It graced Christmas tables in homes where elegance and tradition mattered equally. The cake's association with New York glamour made it feel special, even in humble kitchens far from Manhattan. Oyster stew, served in coffee cups, became the fancy first course that cost less than $2 to feed 8 people. A pint of fresh oysters for $1.29 was heated gently in milk with butter, salt, and pepper, creating a simple soup that tasted surprisingly elegant. The oysters were added at the last minute to prevent toughening, floating in creamy broth with their liquid adding oceanic depth. Children were divided on oyster stew, some loving the richness while others rejected the texture entirely, but its presence on the table signaled that this was a special meal. Fathers often claimed oyster stew as their territory, taking pride in heating the milk to exactly the right temperature and adding oysters at precisely the right moment. The stew was served in china cups or fancy mugs, making even children feel sophisticated and grown up. This was the one dish that made working families feel like they were dining in restaurants despite eating at home. Pitch pie was the kind of dessert that made people stop mid-conversation when it was carried to the table, its glossy meringue peaks and golden filling catching the light in a way no one could ignore. The magic started on the stovetop, where sugar and butter melted together to create a deep caramel flavor that filled the kitchen with warmth. Once the mixture thickened into a silky custard, it was poured into a flaky crust and crowned with a cloud of meringue. Families loved it because it felt luxurious without being expensive, a dessert that tasted like a special occasion even on ordinary days. During the holidays, butterscotch pie was always one of the first things to disappear, with children fighting over the corner slices where the meringue browned just a little more. But as boxed pudding mixes and frozen pies became household staples, this stovetop masterpiece faded out. No one wanted to stand over a pot stirring carefully, watching for that perfect moment when the custard thickened. The world got busier, and the pie slipped quietly into memory. Yet anyone who tasted it fresh will tell you that nothing made with shortcuts ever came close, a lost masterpiece of sweetness and tradition. Orange slice with molasses was one of the simplest Thanksgiving dishes, yet one that carried the most heart. Cornmeal mixed with water and a pinch of salt baked into a dense, rustic loaf that filled bellies without costing a cent. A drizzle of molasses turned it into something close to dessert, sweet and earthy with every bite, especially when the molasses thickened into sticky ribbons on the warm bread. Families ate it slowly, savoring it because it was often the only sweet thing they would taste all week. For families who did not always have sugar or store-bought sweets, this was as close to luxury as a holiday meal could get, a reminder that simplicity could still feel like celebration. It tasted like survival wrapped in warmth, a dish born from necessity but remembered with affection. As times changed, corn pone slipped away, but its spirit still echoes through every homemade cornbread recipe, especially in homes that still honor the old ways. Apple corn balls were the edible decorations that doubled as desserts, hanging from Christmas trees before being devoured by eager children. Popped corn was mixed with a hot syrup of sugar, corn syrup, and butter that bound the kernels together into sticky, sweet spheres. Working quickly while the syrup was still pliable, mothers shaped balls with buttered hands, sometimes adding food coloring for festive red and green versions. The cost was minimal. Popcorn was among the cheapest snacks available, and the syrup ingredients were pantry staples. Children watched the transformation with wonder, seeing everyday popcorn become something magical and Christmassy. Wrapped in waxed paper or cellophane, popcorn balls became gifts for neighbors and classmates. The satisfying crunch gave way to caramelized sweetness that lingered on fingers and faces. Popcorn balls proved that celebration did not require expensive ingredients, just creativity and a willingness to get a little sticky. Chocolate with seafoam frosting was a Christmas tradition that combined warm spices with one of the most ethereal frostings ever created. The cake itself was a study in balance, with cinnamon, ginger, cloves, nutmeg, and allspice working together without any single flavor dominating. Brown sugar gave the batter a caramel undertone that deepened the spice flavors, while buttermilk kept everything tender and moist. The seafoam frosting was the true showstopper, made by cooking brown sugar, corn syrup, and water to the soft ball stage, then beating it into egg whites until it became impossibly light and glossy. The frosting looked like ocean foam or fresh fallen snow, with a texture that dissolved on the tongue. Making seafoam frosting required precise timing and a strong arm, as the beating could take 20 minutes by hand. The combination of dense, spicy cake and airy, sweet frosting created a contrast that made every bite interesting. Lime Jell-O with cottage cheese became the salad that confused everyone but somehow kept appearing year after year. A package of lime Jell-O was mixed with cottage cheese and sometimes crushed pineapple, creating a lumpy, jiggly green mass that looked distinctly unappetizing. The combination of sweet gelatin and tangy cottage cheese created flavor confusion that divided families, with some members defending it passionately while others refused to let it touch their plates. Mothers who served it claimed it was traditional, passed down from their mothers who had found the recipe in magazines during the 1950s. The salad represented a specific era of American cooking when Jell-O was considered sophisticated and cottage cheese was diet food, combining them into something that seemed modern and health-conscious. Children universally rejected it, staring in horror at the wobbly green squares with visible cheese curds suspended throughout. This was one tradition that probably should have been forgotten. Creamed celery with almonds was the hidden gem of 1920s hotel dining, grace disguised as a side dish. Stalks of celery, once humble and crisp, were simmered gently until soft, then bathed in a velvety white sauce made of butter, cream, and flour. Slivered almonds sprinkled on top added a satisfying crunch that broke through the creaminess. The dish shimmered pale green and ivory, elegant without trying too hard. Served beside roasts or fish, it added quiet sophistication to any table. The scent was light but luxurious, a blend of butter and warmth that drifted through the room. In grand hotels, it was served beneath silver covers. In home kitchens, it arrived in chipped baking dishes. But in both, it meant the same thing: care, taste, and celebration. For Christmas, it offered something different, rich but delicate, indulgent but refined. It was the kind of food that made people sit up a little straighter, even at the family table. Creamed celery with almonds was grace in a casserole dish, a taste of gentility that turned simple ingredients into an unforgettable holiday memory. Chocolate peppermint roll was the showstopper of every holiday dessert table. A light sponge cake baked flat and rolled with a creamy peppermint filling, it looked like something from a glossy 1970s magazine ad. The swirl inside revealed its story, a perfect balance of rich chocolate and cool mint, made to impress, but easy to love. The aroma filled kitchens with festive warmth, the kind that made people linger just a little longer near the oven. Cooks dusted the top with powdered sugar or drizzled thin ribbons of chocolate glaze for that final elegant touch. It was the dessert that made guests pause before cutting, admiring the spiral as if it were art. Making it was a test of care. The cake had to be rolled while warm, the filling spread with confidence. When sliced, it held its shape beautifully, soft, light, and filled with joy. For homemakers of the 70s, it was proof that creativity and precision could coexist. Served chilled, it was as refreshing as it was decadent. One bite felt like winter wrapped in sweetness, cool, rich, and entirely unforgettable. Candy drops were the jewel-toned confections that mothers poured into molds or dropped onto marble slabs, each piece catching light like stained glass. Sugar, corn syrup, and water were boiled to the hard crack stage, then quickly mixed with food coloring and flavoring before being poured into shapes. The process required speed and precision. Hard candy set within minutes and couldn't be reworked once it cooled. Lemon drops glowed yellow, cinnamon discs burned red, and mint rounds sparkled green, creating a rainbow on every candy dish. Children loved sucking on these candies, feeling them slowly dissolve and release intense bursts of flavor. Some mothers used antique molds passed down through generations, pressing candy into shapes of Christmas trees, bells, and stars. The candies kept for weeks in tins, making them perfect for gift-giving and stocking stuffers. Hard candy drops required mastering high-temperature sugar work, a skill that separated casual candy makers from serious Christmas confectioners. Jam cake was a spice-filled wonder that transformed pantry staples into holiday splendor across Southern and Midwestern kitchens. Blackberry jam was the traditional choice, folded into batter rich with buttermilk, spices, and sometimes cocoa, creating moist cake with fruity sweetness throughout. The jam provided both flavor and moisture, making the cake tender and forgiving even for less experienced bakers. Caramel frosting was the classic accompaniment, its burnt sugar notes complementing the berry-laced crumb perfectly. Some families used whatever jam they had preserved from summer gardens, meaning each year's cake tasted different depending on harvest. The cake was dense enough to slice cleanly yet moist enough to melt in the mouth. Christmas baking often meant pulling out the last precious jars of summer preserves, transforming them into holiday splendor. Jam cake represented farmhouse tradition of wasting nothing. Jellied cranberry rings were Thanksgiving's edible art. Homemade cranberry sauce was poured into molds, chilled, and turned out in perfect circles to adorn the holiday spread. The jewel-red rings shimmered beside the turkey, adding color and ceremony to the table. In the mid-century, when presentation was everything, this dish embodied the era's aesthetic pride. Housewives competed to perfect the shape, the smoothness, the glossy finish. The flavor was tart, bright, and just sweet enough to balance the meal. Over time, convenience cans replaced molds and the artistry disappeared. But in those who remember, the memory still glows. The wobble, the shine, the first perfect slice. Jellied cranberry rings were edible nostalgia, a reminder that beauty once had a place at every meal. Cherry lemon ribbon cake was sunshine late. Mince pie was the grand finale of old-fashioned Thanksgivings. Filled with dried fruits, spices, and sometimes sweet or meat, it was rich, dark, and deeply aromatic. Its scent alone could fill a home with warmth and expectation. This pie told stories of early settlers who stretched what they had into something celebratory. The filling was simmered slowly, seasoned with nutmeg, cinnamon, and clove, flavors that tasted like history itself. Mince pie wasn't light or fleeting. It was meant to be savored, slice by slice. For generations, it sat proudly beside pumpkin and apple pies, holding its own as the taste of tradition. Today, it's nearly vanished from holiday tables, replaced by easier, milder desserts. But for those who remember, mince pie was more than food. It was the taste of gratitude, memory, and time well kept. Innovative use of a fudgy filling within a cake, capturing the hearts of many during the Pillsbury Bake-Off in 1966. Its decline in popularity can be traced to the evolution of dessert preferences towards lighter, less rich options. Additionally, the complexity of achieving the perfect gooey center without undercooking the rest of the cake presents a challenge for the average home baker, contributing to its waning presence in modern kitchens. As consumers have grown more health-conscious, the dense, calorie-laden nature of the cake further diminishes its appeal. However, the enduring love for chocolate and nostalgia for classic desserts offers an opportunity for Tunnel of Fudge Cake to be reinvented with healthier ingredients and simplified preparation techniques. Making her Apple Brown Betty layered sliced apples with buttered breadcrumbs and brown sugar into a dessert that cost almost nothing, yet tasted deeply satisfying and comforting. Stale bread found new life as crumbs toasted in butter, becoming golden and crispy before being layered with seasoned fruit. Cinnamon and nutmeg perfumed the layers while lemon juice kept the apples bright and prevented browning. As the Betty baked, The crumbs absorbed the apple juices and the top turned gloriously crunchy while the inside stayed soft and fruity. The dessert required no special pan, no pastry skills, just the willingness to layer ingredients and let the oven work its magic. Families with apple trees made Brown Betty throughout fall and winter, using stored fruit that might otherwise go soft before being eaten. Served warm with fresh cream poured over, it rivaled any fancy pie. Apple Brown Betty represented thrift transformed into genuine deliciousness that families requested again and again. Cake reigned supreme as the most requested Christmas dessert across the American South, its snowy white layers and generous coating of fresh coconut making it look like winter itself. The cake required cracking and shredding fresh coconuts by hand, a task producing incomparably sweet, moist shreds, nothing like the dried packaged variety. 3 or 4 tender white layers were stacked with cooked 7-minute frosting that billowed like clouds, then covered completely with fresh coconut. The coconut had to be applied while frosting was still tacky, pressed gently into every surface until the cake resembled a snowball. Some bakers poked holes in layers and drizzled fresh coconut milk over them for extra moisture. The finished cake was displayed on the most elegant cake stand the household owned, often on a silver pedestal reserved only for Christmas. Children would sneak pinches of sweet coconut from the sides when adults were not looking. Today's coconut cakes rarely approach this level of devotion. Yellow salad with shredded carrots became the dish that confused and delighted children in equal measure. A package of orange or lemon jello for 10 cents was mixed according to directions, then refrigerated until partially set before folding in shredded carrots and sometimes crushed pineapple. The result was sweet, jiggly, and vaguely vegetable-like, occupying a strange space between side dish and dessert. Children loved the wobble and sweetness, but remained suspicious of the carrot shreds suspended in translucent gelatin. Mothers served it with pride, knowing they were sneaking vegetables into a form that children would actually eat without complaint. The salad was often molded into festive shapes using bundt pans or decorative molds, then unmolded onto lettuce leaves for presentation. This was the height of 1960s culinary sophistication, representing modernity and convenience that made housewives feel like they were keeping up with the times. Molasses cookies used to fill holiday tins long before chocolate chip cookies took over the world. Soft, spiced, and deeply fragrant, they were made with molasses, ginger, cinnamon, and cloves. Flavors that tasted like winter settling in. Children dipped them in milk. Adults paired them with coffee, and everyone appreciated how long they stayed fresh. These cookies were practical, affordable, and comforting in a way that no modern packaged dessert quite captures. They appeared at bake sales, church socials, and Thanksgiving dinners as symbols of warmth and tradition. But when chocolate became the star of American desserts and holiday baking turned toward richer treats, molasses cookies faded quietly from the spotlight. Still, their flavor is unmatched. Simple, homey, and gently sweet. A cookie that tastes like memory. Pineapple glazed country ham was a Thanksgiving centerpiece in homes where turkey was not affordable or not preferred, a dish that carried generations of tradition in every slice. The ham was salted, cured, and pan-fried or baked, then brushed with thick, dark molasses that caramelized into a sweet crust over the smoky meat, creating layers of flavor that came from time rather than cost. The smell alone could fill a house with holiday warmth, drifting into every room long before the meal began. Slices were cut thick and served beside potatoes, greens, or fried apples, creating a plate that felt rich without requiring anything fancy. The kind of feast built from what a family had rather than what they bought. Molasses was the sweetener families trusted when sugar was scarce, and using it on ham made the holiday feel special, a reminder of the harvest and the hard work behind it. As turkey took over American tables, country ham faded from the spotlight, but its tradition remains strong in the hills, where the flavor still carries the weight of memory. Watergate salad appeared on holiday tables throughout the 1970s, its pale green color and mysterious origins making it a conversation piece at every gathering. Named after the scandal, though no one knew why, this dish combined instant pistachio pudding with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, chopped pecans, and whipped topping folded into fluffy sweetness. Preparation took minutes, making it a favorite of busy hostesses needing impressive results without labor. The pistachio pudding gave it that distinctive mint green hue that looked festive against red tablecloths. Children adored its candy-like sweetness and surprise of crunchy nuts amid the creamy base. The dish straddled the line between salad and dessert, often appearing alongside savory dishes, though it could have ended any meal. Watergate salad represented the era's embrace of convenience products transformed into something special. Today, it survives mainly in church cookbooks and memories of those who grew up spooning seconds onto full plates. Shoofly pie was a slice of cake held a place of honor on Christmas sideboards across America, its buttery richness requiring no frosting or embellishment to impress. The traditional recipe called for a pound each of butter, sugar, eggs, and flour, creating a dense golden cake that sliced cleanly and kept for weeks. Christmas versions often incorporated brandy, bourbon, or rum that perfumed each slice with holiday spirit. Some bakers added citrus zest, nutmeg, or vanilla to personalize their recipes, but the best pound cakes let the pure flavor of butter and eggs shine through. The cakes were baked slowly in tube pans until they developed a crisp, caramelized crust that gave way to a tender, fine-grained interior. Hostesses served pound cake with coffee after Christmas dinner or alongside fruit and whipped cream for a simple but elegant dessert. The cake's long shelf life made it perfect for unexpected holiday visitors. Pound cake represented restraint and quality over showiness. Caramel candied sweet potatoes made from a single can became the dish children fought over at every table. A 29-cent can of sweet potatoes was sliced into rounds, layered in butter, then covered with brown sugar and cinnamon before baking until edges caramelized into sticky sweetness. Families stretched one can to feed 8 by slicing thin and arranging carefully. The result tasted like dessert, but counted as vegetables, satisfying mothers who wanted nutrition and children who craved sugar. Some added mini marshmallows on top during the last minutes, creating a golden crust that crackled when you broke through with your fork. The dish was so popular that seconds disappeared before first servings reached everyone. Sweet potatoes were cheaper than white potatoes and provided vitamins that Depression-era mothers remembered as essential. This was the taste of celebration that made Thanksgiving special even when money was desperately tight. Cranberry was the rustic cousin of all the fancier apple desserts, a dish that did not care about looks or presentation and still managed to win every heart at the table. It began with sliced apples simmered with cinnamon, butter, and a touch of brown sugar until the whole house smelled like the inside of an orchard. Instead of laying a perfect crust over the top, cooks would break pieces of dough and scatter them unevenly, letting the edges sink into the bubbling fruit as it baked. The juices caramelized around the dough, turning each little piece into something crisp, chewy, and irresistible. This was a dessert for families who valued flavor over perfection, people who understood that the best dishes are sometimes the messiest. Children loved it because it felt fun, like a dessert that broke the rules, and adults loved it because it tasted like the orchard harvest served straight from the pan. But as crisps and cobblers became more popular and easier to sell in bakeries, the pandowdy quietly slipped away. Its uneven top was not camera-ready, and its old-fashioned name did not help it survive in a modern world. Still, anyone who ever ate it fresh from the oven remembers the way it tasted like fall itself, a forgotten treasure hiding in plain sight. Milk pie with nutmeg was the quiet dessert of rural Thanksgivings, the one that did not look fancy, but always disappeared first. It was made from ingredients that lived permanently in the pantry: flour, sugar, buttermilk, and a dusting of nutmeg that warmed the whole slice. The filling baked up tangy and smooth with a texture somewhere between custard and cream. This pie did not rely on luxury or decoration, only balance and simplicity. When times were tight, it was the sweet treat families trusted because it never failed and never cost more than a few coins. Over the years, as holidays leaned toward richer pies piled high with toppings, this humble beauty faded into memory. But anyone who has tasted its gentle warmth knows it still deserves a place at the table. Fried Banana pudding layered simple vanilla custard with sliced bananas and vanilla wafers into something that tasted like celebration at family gatherings and church socials. The custard was homemade, cooked slowly on the stovetop until thick and glossy, then layered while still warm over cookies and fruit. As the pudding chilled overnight, the wafers softened and the bananas released their sweetness into the custard, creating flavors that melded into pure comfort. Meringue topping, browned under the broiler, added visual drama without adding cost. Bananas were among the cheapest fruits available year-round, and vanilla wafers stretched the dessert to serve large families generously. Church potlucks always featured at least one banana pudding, often more when several cooks brought their own cherished versions. Children fought over the soft, pudding-soaked wafers that had absorbed the most custard. Banana pudding represented the 1950s genius of turning everyday ingredients into something families genuinely craved all year long. Though the tradition has faded, scripture cake once represented how faith and food intertwined in American celebrations. Lady Baltimore cake was the grande dame of Southern Christmas baking. A towering white layer cake with filling so complex it required its own recipe card. The cake was delicate white, made with egg whites only, producing ethereal texture that melted on the tongue. The filling was the star, a boiled frosting mixed with chopped figs, raisins, pecans, and candied cherries, creating sweet and chewy contrast to the tender crumb. The entire cake was enrobed in more fluffy white frosting, creating pristine appearance belying the richness within. Named for the novel by Owen Wister, Lady Baltimore cake became synonymous with gracious Southern entertaining and elegant holiday gatherings. Hostesses began preparations days in advance, knowing multiple components required careful timing. Cutting the first slice revealed the treasure hidden inside, and guests would gasp at generous filling studded with dried fruits and nuts. Cranberry sauce from a can shaped like a cylinder became the one store-bought item families served with pride instead of shame. A single 19-cent can of Ocean Spray jellied cranberry sauce provided enough tart sweetness for an entire table when sliced into perfect rounds. Children loved how it held its shape from the can, creating ridged slices that wobbled on the plate like something magical. The sweet tart flavor cut through richness of turkey and gravy, providing brightness that homemade versions struggled to match at this price. Mothers didn't apologize for serving it straight from the can, because everyone secretly preferred this version to complicated cranberry relishes costing 3 times as much to make. Some families got fancy by mixing it with chopped apples, but most served those perfect ridged slices exactly as they emerged from the can. This was one of the few convenience foods that working families embraced without guilt. Stuffing berry pudding with hard sauce was one of those desserts that looked humble on the outside but carried a surprising punch once you cut into it. This steamed pudding was dense, tart, and beautifully old-fashioned, the kind of dish families made before ovens were common in every home. The cranberries gave it a deep ruby color and a sharpness that cut through the heaviness of a Thanksgiving meal, and it always arrived at the table warm enough to fog up the windows. But the real magic came from the hard sauce, a thick mixture of butter, sugar, and a touch of something strong enough to make everyone at the table raise their eyebrows just a bit. When you dolloped it over the pudding, it melted slowly, seeping into every corner and creating a flavor no modern dessert can truly imitate. Families made this because it felt festive, grown up, and cozy all at once, a dessert that lit up the room even without frosting or decorations. Over time, the steaming process fell out of fashion, and people traded long cooking times for convenience. Microwaves replaced kettles, boxed mixes replaced handwritten recipes, and the pudding slipped quietly into obscurity. But the truth is, a dessert like this was never about convenience. It was about gathering in the kitchen, checking the pot, waiting together, and finally sharing something warm and indulgent on a cold holiday night, a forgotten classic, but one with a heart that has never really disappeared. Cakes made from leftover mash were a hillbilly necessity, especially after a long Thanksgiving when not a scrap could be wasted. Cold mashed potatoes were mixed with flour, onions, and sometimes an egg, shaped by hand, and fried until crisp on the outside and soft inside. They stretched leftovers into another meal, making sure no one went hungry the next day and that nothing from the holiday table went to waste. These cakes were often eaten for breakfast with coffee or carried out to the barn as a quick bite between chores. Rural households relied on dishes like this because they turned simple ingredients into real comfort, creating warmth from what others might throw away. Potato cakes were proof that thrift and flavor could go hand in hand, that good food did not need to be complicated. Today, they rarely appear on holiday menus, pushed aside by ready-made breakfasts and quick reheats. But their memory still brings warmth to anyone who grew up tasting them right out of the skillet, hot enough to burn your fingers, but too good to wait. Glorified rice transformed leftover grain into a festive dessert salad that children begged for and adults secretly loved just as much. Cold-cooked rice was folded with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream until it became unrecognizable from its humble origins. Some versions added chopped nuts or coconut for texture, while others kept the base simple. The dish needed thorough chilling, allowing flavors to meld and rice to soften in the creamy mixture. Served in crystal bowls, glorified rice looked almost bridal, pale and dotted with bright cherry red. The sweetness made it controversial as a side dish, yet families insisted it belonged alongside turkey and gravy. This was thrift elevated to celebration, using rice that might otherwise go to waste. Mothers passed down specific ratios, each family believing their version superior. Glorified rice represented an era when creativity with basics was celebrated, when making something from nothing was its own form of kitchen magic. Chess cake transformed the beloved Southern pie into layer cake form, bringing that distinctive custard-like sweetness to a new format. The cake layers were dense and buttery, almost like pound cake, providing a sturdy base for the rich filling and frosting. The chess filling or frosting replicated the pie's signature flavor, made from butter, sugar, eggs, and a touch of cornmeal that gave it slight texture. Some recipes added vanilla, lemon juice, or even vinegar to balance the sweetness. The result was intensely sweet but not cloying, with a richness that satisfied even the most serious sweet tooth. Chess cake was particularly popular in Kentucky and Tennessee, where chess pie had long been a regional specialty. The cake version allowed hostesses to serve the beloved flavor at gatherings where pie would have been impractical. Making chess cake required understanding how to balance sweetness with just enough acid and salt to keep it interesting. It's made from biscuit mix became the bread that required zero skill but delivered maximum comfort. A box of biscuit for 49 cents could make dozens of biscuits following the simple recipe printed on the side. The mix was stirred with milk until just combined, dropped by spoonfuls onto baking sheets, then baked until golden brown with flaky layers. These weren't fancy buttermilk biscuits requiring technique and cold butter, but they were reliable, fast, and genuinely tasty. Children would split them open while steaming hot, stuffing them with butter and honey, or using them to soak up every drop of gravy left on their plates. Mothers appreciated how the mix eliminated the possibility of failure, ensuring that even stressed, distracted holiday cooks could produce decent bread. The biscuits represented modernity and convenience that freed women from baking anxiety, allowing them to focus energy on dishes that actually required skill and attention to detail for success. Macarons made from biscuit mix became the bread that required zero skill but delivered maximum comfort. A box of biscuit for 49 cents could make dozens of biscuits following the simple recipe printed on the side. The mix was stirred with milk until just combined, dropped by spoonfuls onto baking sheets, then baked until golden brown with flaky layers. These weren't fancy buttermilk biscuits requiring technique and cold butter, but they were reliable, fast, and genuinely tasty. Children would split them open while steaming hot, stuffing them with butter and honey, or using them to soak up every drop of gravy left on their plates. Mothers appreciated how the mix eliminated the possibility of failure, ensuring that even stressed, distracted holiday cooks could produce decent bread. The biscuits represented modernity and convenience that freed women from baking anxiety, allowing them to focus energy on dishes that actually required skill and attention to detail for success. Macaroni. Before filet mignon and lobster took over Valentine's menus, A well-prepared roast was the gold standard for romantic home cooking. It was rustic yet refined, filling the house with warmth and rich aroma. And in the mid-20th century, cooks looking to elevate tradition found a new way to add elegance: honey and lavender. Lavender, long associated with romance and relaxation, has been used in cooking since the Middle Ages. Its floral, slightly citrusy notes paired beautifully with the natural sweetness of honey, creating a glaze that was delicate yet complex. Honey itself has deep romantic symbolism. Once considered an aphrodisiac, it was the namesake of the honeymoon. Together, they turned an ordinary roasted chicken into something worthy of a special occasion. So why did this dish fade from home kitchens? One reason is the changing perception of floral flavors. By the late 20th century, lavender became more associated with soaps and perfumes than with food, making some home cooks hesitant to experiment. At the same time, convenience meals pushed slow-roasted dishes aside in favor of quick, high-heat cooking methods. Cracklin cornbread was the hearty, savory bread that turned ordinary cornbread into something boldly rustic. The kind of dish people remembered long after the pan-cooled pork cracklings, crispy bits left from rendering fat, were folded into the batter, adding bursts of salty richness to every slice, a reminder that nothing in a hard-working kitchen ever went to waste. The cornbread baked up golden and firm, perfect for sopping gravy or pairing with beans, each bite carrying the taste of the hog that had fed the family through winter. Families prized it because it used every part of the hog, proving once again the creativity behind hillbilly cooking. The cracklings added texture and flavor that felt like a celebration of the year's hard work, a reward for the labor it took to fill smokehouses and pantries. As diets changed and fewer people rendered their own pork, cracklin cornbread became rare. But those who remember it can still taste the crunch, the salt, and the comfort baked into every bite, a flavor tied to tradition as tightly as any holiday memory. Hand-written upside-down cake made canned fruit into a showstopper dessert that never failed to impress holiday guests. Brown sugar and butter melted together in a cast-iron skillet, topped with pineapple rings and maraschino cherries that became the cake's jeweled crown. Simple yellow cake batter poured over the fruit baked into golden perfection, then flipped dramatically to reveal the caramelized topping. Canned pineapple cost far less than fresh and was available year-round, making this impressive dessert accessible to every budget. The cake required only one pan and basic pantry ingredients, yet looked like it came from an expensive bakery. Children loved the sweet cherries nestled in each pineapple ring, often claiming their favorite piece before the first slice was cut. The caramelized topping formed a glossy glaze that made the whole cake sparkle under holiday lights. Pineapple upside-down cake proved that drama and affordability could share the same dessert plate. Tapioca lemon cheesecake was not the dense New York-style cheesecake modern diners know, but a delicate layer cake filled with homemade lemon curd that brightened winter holiday tables. The cake layers were tender white or yellow cake, light enough to let the filling shine. The lemon cheese filling was a cooked custard of eggs, sugar, butter, and fresh lemon juice that thickened into a glossy, intensely flavored curd. Making the filling required constant stirring over gentle heat to prevent curdling, a task that demanded patience and attention. The tartness of the lemon cut through the richness of holiday meals, providing a refreshing contrast to heavier desserts. 7-minute frosting or simple powdered sugar dusting typically topped the cake. Families in the South treasured their lemon cheese recipes, passing them down through generations. The cake was often made when winter citrus arrived in markets, a seasonal treat that announced the holidays had truly begun. Mock oyster soup was one of the Great Depression's most inventive creations, a meal that tasted luxurious without needing luxury. Families who couldn't afford fresh seafood found a way to mimic the flavor and texture of oysters using crumbled saltine crackers simmered in milk, butter, and onion broth. The crackers softened just enough to take on a silky bite, while the milk created a comforting, creamy base. A dash of Worcestershire sauce or celery salt gave it a faint sea aroma, enough to trick both the nose and the memory. Served with a sprinkle of pepper, it looked and felt like the real thing, warm, hearty, and homey. This dish symbolized the resilience of American cooks, especially women who refused to let scarcity steal dignity from the dinner table. It wasn't about imitation, it was about imagination. Mock oyster soup turned everyday ingredients into something that felt special, proving that even in hard times, hope could simmer quietly on the stove. Special occasion version of a Southern staple, saved for holidays when families wanted something a little grander. The pudding itself was the familiar mixture of bananas, vanilla wafers, and creamy custard, but the meringue transformed it. Beaten until glossy and piled high, it baked into delicate peaks that turned golden under the oven's heat. When brought to the table, it looked almost too pretty to touch, a cloud of sweetness covering a dessert everyone already loved. For decades, this version appeared at Thanksgiving gatherings, offering a soft and comforting sweetness after heavy meals. But as whipped topping replaced homemade meringue and instant pudding became the norm, this beautiful holiday version slipped away. It required patience, a steady hand, and the confidence not to over-whip the egg whites, skills many home cooks stopped practicing. Still, for those who grew up with it, one look at those browned peaks can bring back a whole lifetime of holidays. Mountain-style dumplings were rolled by hand, not dropped by spoon, and that made them dense, hearty, and perfect for feeding a crowd with very little. The dough was mixed from flour, water, and fat, rolled thin, sliced into strips, and simmered in broth until they swelled into tender ribbons that turned the pot into a meal all by itself. These dumplings absorbed every bit of flavor from the pot, turning simple stock into a feast that felt richer than it had any right to be. On Thanksgiving, they appeared beside roasted meats or inside big simmering pots meant to stretch leftovers, feeding every uncle, cousin, and neighbor who showed up hungry. Making them was a tradition that brought generations together in the kitchen, hands dusted with flour, laughter mixing with the bubbling pot as stories were told for the 100th time. But as boxed mixes and quick meals replaced hand-rolled recipes, these dumplings faded from holiday tables. Those who knew them still swear nothing else fills the belly or heart quite the same, and nothing ever will. Tapioca pudding turned tiny pearls into creamy comfort that satisfied sweet cravings at minimal cost during the holiday season. Pearl tapioca simmered in milk until the spheres became translucent and the mixture thickened into silky, spoonable pudding. Eggs, sugar, and vanilla enriched the base, while the tapioca pearls provided the fascinating texture that children loved discovering in each bite. The pudding could be served warm from the stovetop or chilled overnight in the refrigerator, making it versatile for different preferences. A single box of tapioca made multiple batches, stretching the ingredient cost across several dessert servings for the whole family. Some families added coconut or fruit to vary the recipe, but the plain version remained most requested by children and adults alike. Tapioca pudding represented the gentle, nurturing side of 1950s desserts, a food that comforted as much as it satisfied. Butterscotch trays were the colorful appetizer platters that greeted guests before Christmas dinner, their compartments filled with pickles, olives, and crisp vegetables. Cut glass divided dishes held sweet gherkins, stuffed green olives, black olives, celery sticks, carrot curls, and radish roses carved by patient hands. The presentation was meant to impress, each vegetable cut precisely and arranged with care. Children were allowed to graze from relish trays while adults prepared the main meal, keeping small hands busy and appetites partially satisfied. Making radish roses and celery curls required trays were once the quiet opening act of every Thanksgiving feast. Before the turkey, before the sides, came the cool crunch of celery stuffed with pimento cheese or cream cheese and the briny bite of olives. They offered a balance, freshness, before the richness to come. Housewives prided themselves on arranging them neatly, often on cut glass trays. Children would sneak olives off the plate, pretending not to like them but always coming back for more. It was a simple tradition, but one that marked the beginning of the meal with grace and order. Over time, the relish tray faded, replaced by charcuterie boards and modern appetizers. Yet it remains a symbol of hospitality from a slower, more deliberate age. Celery and olive relish trays were Thanksgiving's crisp, elegant overture. Chocolate peppermint roll with cream cheese filling was the pride of holiday bakers in the 1970s and 1980s, a dessert that quietly proved who had real confidence in the kitchen. It was never something you could rush. You baked the thin pumpkin cake just right, warm enough to roll but cool enough not to tear, then wrapped it in a sugared towel so it held its shape. Families watched mothers and grandmothers handle it like a fragile secret, knowing a single mistake meant starting over. When the cream cheese filling was spread across the unrolled cake, the whole kitchen filled with vanilla and spice. Rolling it back up brought a moment of suspense before those perfect spirals appeared later on the cutting board. But desserts with shortcuts slowly replaced it, and fewer people wanted to spend an afternoon coaxing a thin sheet of cake into behaving. Still, those who tasted it remember the soft pumpkin sponge, the cool, tangy filling, and the feeling that this dessert was part skill and part celebration. Coconut custard sorghum sweet rolls were the kind of Thanksgiving bread that tasted like a blessing pulled straight from the land itself. The dough was soft and tender, kneaded by hand until it felt alive under the palms, then brushed with warm sorghum syrup before baking. Sorghum was a treasure in hill country kitchens, a sweetener made from tall cane that families harvested and pressed themselves, its flavor deeper and earthier than anything store-bought. When the rolls baked, the syrup caramelized on top, turning sticky and golden, filling the house with a smell that felt like autumn settling into the walls. Children hovered near the oven, waiting for the pan to come out, knowing the first roll would still be warm enough to steam in the cool holiday air. These rolls appeared on tables because they were special, but also because they were simple, made from ingredients every family kept on hand. As modern sweeteners took over and sorghum mills closed down, the tradition faded, leaving only memories of rolls so soft they pulled apart in long, sweet strands. Today they linger mostly in stories, reminders of a holiday table built on local harvest and slow, careful hands. Dry date bars packed dried fruit and oats into chewy squares that traveled well and lasted for weeks, stored in tins without losing their appeal. Chopped dates were cooked with sugar and water until soft and jammy, then spread between layers of buttery oat crumble that turned golden when baked. As the bars emerged from the oven, the oat mixture had become crispy, while the date filling stayed soft and sticky in the center. Each square offered contrasting textures, crunchy exterior giving way to chewy, intensely sweet center that satisfied in small portions. Dates were affordable dried fruit that provided natural sweetness and kept indefinitely in pantries without refrigeration. The bars required no frosting, no decoration, just honest ingredients combined with simple technique and patience. Families made large batches for Christmas cookie exchanges, knowing date bars would stand out among fancier offerings. Date bars represented practical deliciousness that never went out of style through changing decades. Prune cake was once a beloved Christmas tradition that has fallen victim to unfair modern prejudices against this misunderstood dried fruit. The prunes were stewed until tender, then pureed and folded into a spiced batter that produced one of the moistest cakes imaginable. Cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, and cloves perfumed the cake with the warm scent of the holiday season. The prunes gave the cake a deep, complex sweetness that was richer than sugar alone could provide, along with a dense, satisfying texture. Buttermilk caramel frosting was the traditional pairing, its burnt sugar notes echoing the caramelized flavors of the dried fruit. Grandmothers who grew up during the Depression knew prunes as nutritious, affordable, and delicious, not something to be embarrassed about. The cakes kept beautifully for days, actually improving as the flavors melded together. Today's bakers might rebrand it as dried plum cake, but those who remember the original know no renaming could improve upon perfection. Spice cake. Dinner rolls from frozen dough made Thanksgiving tables look abundant while costing less than homemade versions. A package of frozen Rhodes rolls for 49 cents contained 24 pieces of dough that rose while families were at church or preparing other dishes. The rolls were placed in greased pans, covered with towels, and left to proof until doubled in size, filling kitchens with yeasty smell of fresh bread. When baked, They turned golden with soft, pillowy interiors that pulled apart in steaming sections. Children slathered them with margarine while still too hot to touch, burning fingers but unable to wait for butter to melt. These rolls made tables look generous and festive, like families had spent hours baking when the truth was far simpler and cheaper. Mothers could focus energy on turkey and sides while rolls handled themselves with minimal supervision, soaking up gravy and wiping plates clean. Prune cake was one of those desserts people loved long before they ever admitted it. A moist, spiced treat that showed up on countless holiday tables thanks to its deep flavor and long shelf life. Grandmothers especially swore by it, calling it their secret weapon because it never dried out and always tasted better the next day. The prunes disappeared into the batter, lending sweetness and moisture without announcing themselves too boldly, and the spices wrapped everything in a warm, comforting aroma. It was a cake that stretched ingredients wisely, perfect for large families and tight budgets. Children would roll their eyes at the thought of prunes, but one bite of that sticky sweet crumb made them believers. It was a dessert born from practicality, the kind of treat that made the most of what people had on hand. But as times changed and holiday desserts became flashier, prune cake was left behind. It did not look glamorous, it did not have fancy toppings, and it did not fit the modern obsession with picture-perfect food. So it vanished, even though anyone who ever loved it can still taste it in their memory, a quiet classic forgotten but never truly gone. Butterscotch corn was the dish that turned simple sweet corn into something unforgettable, especially when cooked in bacon grease. The kernels sizzled and popped as they hit the hot iron, soaking up all the smoky flavor and turning golden around the edges. This was not cream-style corn from a can, and it was definitely not corn baked into a casserole. It was country cooking at its purest, built on the belief that a good skillet could transform anything families served, fried corn beside everything from ham to wild game. And it held its own every time. It was sweet, salty, and rich. The kind of side that made plates a little heavier and bellies a lot happier. Modern kitchens rarely take the time to fry corn this way anymore, but those who grew up on it can still remember the sound of that iron skillet and the smell of bacon drifting through the house. Buttermilk pudding turned leftover rice into creamy Christmas comfort that satisfied both children and adults with its gentle sweetness. Cooked rice was combined with milk, sugar, eggs, and vanilla, then baked slowly until the custard set and a golden skin formed on top. Raisins plumped in the warm mixture, becoming soft bursts of sweetness in every spoonful. The pudding could be served warm from the oven or chilled overnight, becoming even creamier as it rested. Cinnamon or nutmeg dusted on top added holiday fragrance without adding cost. Families who always had rice in the pantry found this dessert endlessly adaptable, using whatever milk was available and adjusting sweetness to taste. The slow baking filled homes with warmth during cold December evenings. Rice pudding proved that the simplest ingredients, treated with patience and care, could create something children requested again and again throughout the season. Graham Cracker Black walnut cake showcased one of America's most distinctive native nuts, with a flavor so intense it divided families into passionate admirers and determined avoiders. Black walnuts grew wild across the eastern United States, and gathering them each fall was a messy, labor-intensive process that stained hands for weeks. The nuts had a bold, almost wine-like flavor with hints of smoke and earth that English walnuts could never match. Bakers folded them generously into butter cake batter and pressed them into caramel or cream cheese frosting. The strong flavor meant a little went far, but true devotees packed their cakes with as many nuts as the batter could hold. Rural families who gathered their own black walnuts considered them precious, using them only for special occasions like Christmas. The cakes were dense and richly flavored, perfect for slicing thin and savoring slowly. Though black walnuts can still be found, the labor of gathering and shelling them has made this cake increasingly rare. Using the good china without fear was one of those elegant traditions only Grandma could balance between formality and warmth. All year, the china stayed tucked behind a glass cabinet door, resting on velvet like fragile treasures. But But on Thanksgiving, she opened that cabinet with confidence, believing special things were meant to be used. Each plate glowed under the dining room light, and she handled them with an ease that made everyone else relax. She never hovered or worried. To her, using the good china was a way of honoring family, making the day feel worthy of beauty. She laid each plate on fresh linens and paired them with polished silver, letting even the kids help carefully because she wanted them to learn the joy of holding something precious. Holidays, she believed, were for sharing, not protecting. And somehow, despite their age, the plates rarely chipped. That ritual made the meal feel grown up and timeless, something people remembered long after the food was gone. Eating from those plates felt like stepping into tradition. Scalloped oysters, adding pecans to almost everything during Thanksgiving, was one of those habits Grandma never explained but everyone accepted. It was part tradition, part instinct, and part quiet belief that pecans made a dish feel complete. She sprinkled them into pies, folded them into breads, and scattered them over casseroles with easy confidence. The house would fill with a soft, nutty smell, a warm aroma that felt tied to every holiday memory. She cracked some by hand, saving the biggest pieces for the top of her desserts because she cared about how they looked as much as how they tasted. Even store-bought pecans were sorted carefully, chosen like small treasures. Pecans were not just an ingredient. They were her signature, the gentle crunch that told you she had passed through the kitchen. Newer recipes came and went, but nothing replaced the comfort of finding pecans in her dishes. They were the sound, smell, and texture of Thanksgiving in her home, one sprinkle at a time. She built the feeling of the holiday. Flavors are as tied to Valentine's Day as red velvet. It's rich, decadent, and undeniably festive. But its origins go back much further than most people realize. During the early 20th century, cocoa powder was sometimes processed with vinegar to enhance color and texture, creating cakes with a naturally reddish hue. By the 1950s, food coloring took over, turning red velvet into a visual showstopper, perfect for romantic occasions. And what happens when you combine red velvet's signature flavor with another classic, cheesecake? You get a dessert that's as indulgent as it is nostalgic. Swirling tangy cream cheese into fudgy brownies balanced sweetness with a touch of sophistication. Recipes like this became popular in mid-century cookbooks, offering a dessert that felt elegant without requiring the skill of a pastry chef. But as the years went on, dessert trends shifted. By the 2000s, red velvet had gone mainstream, showing up in everything from cupcakes to lattes. Its once special charm got lost in the wave of mass production. And with bakeries offering quick, ready-made options, the art of homemade Valentine's treats started fading. Still, few desserts feel as festive or as shareable. Because if love is all about balance, what better symbol than a brownie that's both rich and tangy? Tunnel of Fudge Cake stood out for its peanut butter fudge required no chocolate at all, stretching pantry staples into creamy candy that rivaled expensive confections. Peanut butter, sugar, milk, and butter cooked together until the mixture reached soft ball stage, then beat until thick and creamy. Poured into a buttered pan, the fudge set into squares that were rich, sweet, and intensely peanutty. The recipe used ingredients most families already had, making it possible to produce holiday candy without a special shopping trip. Children loved helping stir the heavy mixture, watching it transform from grainy to glossy as the beating progressed. The fudge could be made in under an hour, perfect for last-minute gifts or unexpected company. Cut into small squares and arranged on plates, it looked as elegant as any store-bought candy. Peanut butter fudge taught that homemade gifts carried more love than anything money could purchase from the department store candy counter. Sorghum cake drew its distinctive character from the thick, dark syrup that once sweetened tables across the rural South and Midwest. Before refined sugar became affordable, sorghum molasses was the sweetener of choice, produced by pressing juice from sorghum cane and cooking it down to syrupy thickness. The resulting cakes had deep, complex sweetness with notes of caramel, smoke, and something almost metallic that refined sugar could never provide. Spices like ginger, cinnamon, and cloves were essential partners, their warmth balancing sorghum's intensity. The batter was often made with buttermilk, which reacted with acidic sorghum to create tender crumb. Farm families treasured their sorghum sources, often trading with neighbors who operated small mills each autumn. Christmas cakes made with sorghum connected families to agricultural heritage. Though sorghum syrup can still be found, the cakes it sweetened have largely disappeared. Coconut. Cranberry orange relish made from fresh cranberries and oranges represented the one truly homemade side dish that required actual effort. A bag of fresh cranberries for 39 cents and one orange were ground together in a meat grinder with sugar, creating a bright red relish that was both tart and sweet. The texture was chunky and fresh, completely different from canned cranberry sauce that dominated most tables. This relish was labor-intensive, requiring someone to feed cranberries and orange pieces through the grinder while catching the mixture in a bowl below. Children generally preferred the canned version, but adults appreciated the complexity and freshness of homemade relish that tasted like actual fruit rather than sweetened gel. The relish represented tradition and effort, showing that the cook had invested time and energy into making something special, rather than just opening cans. Some families made it days ahead, allowing the flavors to meld and mellow in the refrigerator. Turkey sandwiches were the dessert you baked when you needed something that could stretch across a big family gathering and still leave everyone satisfied. They were soft and chewy, filled with oats, cinnamon, brown sugar, and handfuls of raisins that plumped up in the oven. The bars baked into thick, golden squares that smelled like comfort the moment you opened the oven door. Families made them because they were easy, reliable, and far kinder on the budget than pies or cakes that required more ingredients. Children loved them because they felt like getting dessert before dinner even started, and adults appreciated how they stayed fresh for days. These bars were the quiet workhorses of holiday baking, slipped into tins, stacked on plates, and offered to neighbors dropping by unexpectedly. But as holiday desserts grew fancier and more visually impressive, oatmeal raisin bars fell off the menu. They were too simple, too plain, too old-fashioned for the new era of glossy pastries. Still, anyone who bites into one today will taste the tenderness of a dessert that knew exactly what it was supposed to do: feed a crowd with warmth and ease. Homemade chow chow relish was a tangy, crunchy topping made from whatever the garden had left at the end of the season: green tomatoes, cabbage, peppers, onions, and anything else that needed saving. In hillbilly homes, chow chow was not an optional side. It was the finishing touch that brought beans, meats, and vegetables to life, especially during Thanksgiving when heavy dishes needed a spark of brightness. The whole process felt like a season's farewell, chopping and stewing the vegetables with vinegar, sugar, and spices until the mixture tasted both sweet and sharp. Families stored jars in cool cellars, ready to open during the holidays when fresh vegetables were long gone. Chow chow was a reminder of the garden's generosity. Even in the colder months over the decades, as supermarkets replaced home gardens, this old relish faded away. But it lives on in stories from those who remember a spoonful on top of a steaming bowl of beans. Bread pudding transformed stale loaves into Christmas comfort, turning what would have been waste into one of the most beloved desserts of the era. Thrifty housewives saved bread heels and dried slices throughout the week, knowing Sunday's pudding depended on their frugality. The bread was torn into pieces, soaked in a custard of eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla, then baked until golden and puffed. Raisins or dried fruit added sweetness when available, while cinnamon and nutmeg made the kitchen smell like the holidays. The custard transformed dry bread into something almost magical, creamy in the center with crispy edges that everyone fought over. A simple sauce of butter, sugar, and vanilla, or whiskey for the adults, turned humble ingredients into celebration. Bread pudding cost nearly nothing yet delivered warmth and satisfaction that expensive desserts could not match. It taught children that nothing should ever go to waste. Pudding was the heavy, warming dessert that sustained families through cold Christmas seasons, a steamed cake made with beef suet that provided richness no butter could match. The suet was grated fine and mixed with flour, breadcrumbs, sugar, dried fruits, and spices, then packed into molds and steamed for hours until dense and fragrant. The fat melted during cooking, creating pockets of moisture throughout the pudding that kept it tender for days. Unlike modern desserts that aimed for lightness, suet pudding was meant to stick to ribs and provide warmth during the coldest months. Families served it with hard sauce, custard, or simply a drizzle of cream. The tradition came from England, where suet puddings had fed working families for centuries. American cooks continued making them through the early 20th century before vegetable shortenings replaced animal fats in most kitchens. Those who remember suet pudding recall its unique texture and satisfying heaviness that no modern dessert replicates. Made from day-old bread transformed what bakeries sold for pennies into the most fought-over dish on the table. Mothers saved bread heels and stale slices throughout November, letting them dry on counters until ready to be cubed and baked into something magnificent. The bread was torn into chunks, mixed with sautéed onions and celery cooked in butter, seasoned with sage and thyme, then moistened with turkey broth until saturated with flavor. Some families added chopped apples for sweetness, while others mixed in sausage when budget allowed extra protein. The stuffing was packed into the turkey cavity where it soaked up drippings or baked separately when the bird was too small. Children hovered near the stove, waiting for edges to get crispy and golden, sneaking pieces before dinner was served. This turned waste into treasure, proving cheapest ingredients could become most beloved when treated with care and seasoning. Green Thanksgiving Showstopper, a towering southern dessert packed with banana, pineapple, and toasted nuts that made the whole room go quiet with the first slice. It tasted like sunshine and warmth even on the coldest holiday morning. Families made it because it felt generous, full of ingredients you saved for special occasions. The batter was thick and fragrant, spiced just enough to feel festive, and the cream cheese frosting wrapped everything in a soft, tangy sweetness. Every layer tasted like celebration. For years, it stood proudly among pies on Thanksgiving buffets, especially in the Deep South, where hospitality meant feeding people with your best. Over time, though, it slipped into birthday parties and spring gatherings instead, pushed aside by pumpkin pies and chocolate desserts that dominated holiday tables. But those who grew up with hummingbird cake remember the joy of cutting into it, the way the fruit kept it moist for days, and how it felt like the dessert that understood the holiday best, abundant, warm, and made to share. A sweet memory worth keeping alive. Oatmeal Raisin Bar. Wild game roast was a Thanksgiving reality for many hillbilly families long before store-bought turkey showed up regularly in rural towns. Squirrel, rabbit, and venison were the meats that fed households because they came from the land and required no money, only skill and luck. Each roast carried the flavor of the woods, slow cooked until tender in cast iron pots that never left the stovetop during cold months. Families gathered around the table, knowing exactly who had tracked the animal, who had dressed it, and who had seasoned the pot. There was pride in serving a meal earned through hard work, not purchased in a bright grocery store aisle. It might not have been glamorous, but it was honest food, and families appreciated every bite because it reflected the life they lived. Children grew up learning that a holiday meal was something you earned, not something wrapped in plastic from a grocery store. When turkey eventually became affordable, wild game roasts faded from the table, but they never faded from memory, especially for those who can still taste the smokiness of a meal that came straight from the hills. Corn pone could. Cornstarch pudding was the blank canvas of 1950s desserts, a simple vanilla base that could become anything a creative cook imagined. Cornstarch, sugar, milk, and vanilla cooked together until thickened into silky pudding that cost mere pennies per serving. Chocolate versions added cocoa powder, butterscotch used brown sugar and butter, and banana pudding layered the vanilla base with sliced fruit and wafers. The pudding could be served warm in bowls or chilled until firm and sliceable. Families who could not afford expensive bakery items found that cornstarch pudding satisfied sweet cravings just as well. Children loved watching the thin milk transform into thick, glossy pudding right before their eyes. Topped with whipped cream or crushed cookies, it looked as impressive as any restaurant dessert. Cornstarch pudding represented the 1950s mastery of making something from almost nothing. Molasses. Red velvet cake emerged as a Christmas showstopper during the 1950s, its dramatic crimson layers making it perfect for holiday tables. The original color came from the reaction between cocoa and acidic buttermilk, producing a subtle reddish hue that bakers enhanced with beet juice or red food coloring. The texture was unlike any other cake, tender, fine crumbed, and slightly tangy from the buttermilk and vinegar in the batter. Cream cheese frosting became the traditional accompaniment, its tang perfectly balancing the cake's subtle chocolate flavor. The Waldorf Astoria Hotel helped popularize the recipe, and soon home bakers everywhere were attempting their own versions. Slicing into a red velvet cake was always dramatic, the vivid red interior contrasting beautifully with white frosting. Mothers saved this cake for Christmas Day dinner, knowing its appearance alone would impress guests. The combination of chocolate, buttermilk, and cream cheese created something utterly distinctive that defined mid-century holiday elegance. Waldorf salad made with apples, celery, and mayonnaise brought crunch and freshness to heavy Thanksgiving plates for less than 50 cents. 2 apples chopped into small cubes were mixed with diced celery, raisins, and chopped walnuts when budget allowed, all bound together with mayonnaise and lemon juice. The salad was assembled in the morning and refrigerated until dinner, allowing flavors to meld and apples to absorb creamy dressing. This wasn't a main dish, but it provided textural contrast that made rich foods more bearable, cutting through gravy and butter with crisp apple and tangy dressing. Children initially protested salad on Thanksgiving, but sweetness of apples and raisins usually won them over after a reluctant first bite. Mothers appreciated how the dish added color to the table and used up apples that were starting to soften, but weren't bad enough to throw away. Cornfly pie was a slice of Appalachian history wrapped in a layer of sticky molasses and crumb topping, a dessert born from frugality and resourcefulness. It was called chouflé because the sweet smell drew flies toward the table, and cooks had to shoo them away as the pie cooled. Families made it because molasses was cheaper and easier to store than sugar, making it the perfect holiday ingredient for households that had more hard work than money. The pie baked into a deep, gooey layer at the bottom with a crumbly cake-like topping on top, creating a texture that felt both rustic and indulgent. Children loved it because it was sweet enough to feel forbidden, and adults enjoyed it because every bite tasted like the land they came from. Over time, as refined sugar became cheap and store-bought pies took over, chouflé pie disappeared from most homes. It was too regional, too old-fashioned, too simple to compete with newer holiday desserts, but the people who remember it still talk about it with a quiet pride. It was a dessert that told a story, and every slice tasted a little like history. Pumpkin cornbread was a practical but delicious twist on a staple that hillbilly families relied on year-round, a quiet celebration of the harvest baked right into the batter. Adding mashed pumpkin to the mix made the cornbread softer, sweeter, and a little more festive for Thanksgiving, giving the bread a warm golden hue that fit perfectly with the season. It was an easy way to stretch ingredients and make use of whatever pumpkins the garden had produced, especially in years when crops were generous. The bread came out golden and fragrant, with a texture that landed somewhere between cornbread and cake, tender enough to eat plain but hearty enough to hold up beside stew or beans. Families ate it with butter, beans, stew, or even molasses drizzled on top, letting it fill the table with warmth. Over time, pumpkin cornbread disappeared as store-bought breads became the norm. But in homes that remember frugal cooking, it still tastes like the holidays, a dish wrapped in memory more than ingredients. Soda cracker pie fooled everyone into thinking they were eating apple pie when no apples existed anywhere in the recipe at all. Crushed soda crackers soaked in a syrup of sugar, water, lemon juice, and cream of tartar somehow transformed into something that tasted remarkably like cooked apples. The chemical reaction between the acidic ingredients and the plain crackers created flavors and textures that mimicked fruit with uncanny accuracy that fooled even skeptics. Baked in a double crust with cinnamon sprinkled throughout, the pie emerged golden and fragrant, its filling soft and apple-like beneath the flaky pastry. Depression-era cooks invented this miracle when real apples were unavailable or unaffordable, and families kept making it through the 1950s because it genuinely worked so well. Children never suspected the trick unless someone revealed the secret after the last slice disappeared from the plate. Soda cracker pie proved that necessity truly was the mother of delicious culinary invention. peppermint cake captured the essence of Christmas candy in cake form, its pink and white layers evoking candy canes and holiday cheer. The cake was typically white layer cake flavored with peppermint extract, sometimes tinted pale pink for visual appeal. Crushed peppermint candies were folded into the batter or pressed onto the frosting, providing both flavor and festive crunch. The frosting was usually white buttercream or 7-minute frosting, also flavored with peppermint and decorated with additional crushed candy. The combination of cool mint and sweet cake was refreshing after heavy holiday meals. Children especially loved peppermint cake, associating it with candy canes and Christmas morning excitement. The cake was visually striking, its pink and white layers revealed when sliced, making it a centerpiece dessert. Bakers had to work quickly when applying crushed candy, as humidity could make the pieces sticky. Peppermint cake represented the playful, joyful side of holiday baking. Bean casserole made with canned beans and canned soup became the vegetable dish that actually disappeared from serving bowls. 2 cans of green beans at 15 cents each were drained and mixed with 1 can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup for 19 cents, topped with French's fried onions for 39 cents, creating a complete side for under $1. The casserole assembled in minutes, requiring no chopping beyond opening cans and stirring everything together in a baking dish. When it emerged from the oven, creamy mushroom sauce bubbled around tender beans, while fried onions turned crispy and golden. This made children actually eat vegetables without complaint, proof that canned ingredients could create something genuinely delicious. The recipe came from the back of the soup can, meaning every family made it exactly the same way, creating a shared experience across Thanksgiving tables nationwide. Mashed potato dumplings were once the grand finale of Thanksgiving, a dessert that made people gasp when it landed on the table. Whole apples were peeled, filled with cinnamon sugar and butter, wrapped in pastry, and baked until the crust glistened with syrup and the apples softened into tender perfection. When you cut into one, steam rose in fragrant clouds, carrying the smell of spice across the room. These dumplings felt like a celebration of the harvest itself, each one a reminder of the orchards and autumn days that shaped the season. But they required time: peeling, stuffing, wrapping, tending to the syrup. Modern holidays moved faster, and pies became easier to assemble and serve. Slowly, apple dumplings lost their place, remembered only by families who still valued slow cooking and dramatic desserts. Yet even today, one bite of a warm dumpling is enough to understand why they once stole the entire show. A dessert meant to be savored. Sweet potato biscuits were the kind of holiday bread that felt almost magical, their warm orange glow shining through the soft dough. Made from mashed sweet potatoes mixed with flour, butter, and just enough sugar to hint at sweetness, they came out tender and fragrant every time, with steam rising the moment they were pulled apart. Families served them with syrup, country ham, or simply warm with butter melting into their centers, letting the sweetness of the potato balance the salt of whatever sat beside them. They marked special occasions because sweet potatoes were precious, and turning them into biscuits felt like turning work into celebration. The kind of recipe that required both effort and pride. Children grabbed them hot from the pan, barely waiting for the adults to sit down, knowing the first bite would be soft enough to taste like comfort itself. Over time, ready-made rolls replaced them, and sweet potato biscuits became rare, tucked away in memory rather than on the table. But their memory stays soft and golden in the minds of those who once ate them fresh from the oven, glowing with warmth and family. Molasses cracker cake required no oven at all, making it perfect for busy holiday kitchens where the stove was already occupied with dinner. Layers of graham crackers were stacked with sweetened whipped cream or vanilla pudding between them, then refrigerated overnight until the crackers softened into cake-like layers. The transformation was almost magical, crisp crackers becoming tender and yielding, absorbing the cream until they melted on the tongue. Chocolate pudding variations created a dessert that rivaled expensive bakery cakes in appearance and satisfaction. The whole thing cost a fraction of traditional layer cakes and required no baking skill whatsoever. Children could help assemble layers, making it a family activity during the hectic holiday season. Crushed graham crackers sprinkled on top added crunch and visual appeal. This icebox cake proved that refrigerator and patience could replace oven and expertise while delivering equal celebration. Baked Alaska was the show-stopping dessert that proved a cook's mastery, its dome of meringue concealing ice cream that somehow survived a hot oven. The construction was engineering. Sponge cake base, firmly frozen ice cream shaped into a dome, then completely covered in meringue that was quickly browned in an extremely hot oven. The meringue insulated the ice cream, allowing the outside to turn golden while the inside stayed frozen. Slicing revealed the dramatic layers: brown meringue, white ice cream, golden cake. The presentation caused gasps around Christmas tables. Making Baked Alaska required precise timing and temperature control, with no room for error. Families reserved it for the most special occasions, when impressing guests was paramount. The dessert represented the era's love of dramatic presentations and technical challenges. Baked Alaska has largely vanished from home kitchens, surviving in occasional restaurant appearances where few remember its former holiday glory. Nut cups filled with mixed nuts became the pre-dinner snack that kept children occupied while adults finished cooking. A can of mixed nuts for 79 cents was divided into small bowls placed around the living room where children and adults gathered before dinner. The nuts provided protein and fat that prevented hunger meltdowns during the long wait between arrival and actual meal service. Children would carefully sort through looking for cashews and avoiding Brazil nuts, creating little piles on napkins while adults caught up on family news. Fathers would crack walnuts with nutcrackers, performing small demonstrations of strength while children watched in fascination. The nuts made people feel fancy and sophisticated, like they were hosting cocktail parties rather than just feeding family. This was one of those small touches that elevated the meal from ordinary to special, signaling that this day was different from regular Sundays when nuts weren't offered before dinner. Eating the food before eating was one of those grounding traditions Grandma held on to no matter how life changed. Everyone gathered around the table, hands linked or heads bowed, and she spoke with a calm voice that settled the room. Her words were simple but heartfelt, touching on gratitude, family, and the hope that everyone would be safe and cared for in the coming year. The moment always brought a hush, reminding people of what the day was truly about. It was a pause that made the meal feel sacred. And even the youngest family members sensed its importance, watching her with quiet attention, understanding that this was the heartbeat of the holiday. Pumpkin hominy casserole was golden comfort baked into a dish that smelled like warmth and community. Cooked hominy, soft kernels of corn, was mixed with melted cheese, milk, and butter, then spread into a casserole dish and topped with breadcrumbs for that perfect crunch. When it baked, the top browned beautifully, crisp around the edges, while the inside turned creamy and rich. The scent of butter and corn filled the kitchen, mingling with the smell of coffee, pies, and conversation. It was mild, mellow, and deeply Southern, made for church potlucks, family gatherings, and winter suppers where food meant togetherness. Every scoop held the taste of home, soft and satisfying, with the kind of richness that didn't need dressing up. In the 1950s, dishes like this were passed around on long folding tables under buzzing lights, each one proudly homemade. You could almost hear the laughter echoing off the linoleum floors as plates clinked and stories passed hands. Hominy casserole wasn't fancy, but it didn't have to be. It was food that fed both body and spirit, warm, generous, and impossible to forget. Savory pastries have always been a mark of refined entertaining. While desserts often dominate Valentine's Day, elegant chess tarts for Christmas multiplied the beloved Southern chess pie into individual portions perfect for holiday gatherings. Each tart shell held the same buttery, custardy filling: eggs, sugar, butter, and a splash of vinegar that gave it distinctive tang. The tops cracked beautifully during baking, creating golden surfaces that shattered with each bite. Families baked dozens for Christmas parties, the small size allowing guests to sample without committing to full slices. The filling was simple but required precise technique to achieve the right texture, neither too runny nor too firm. Some cooks added lemon or chocolate, creating variations that filled platters with visual variety. Children could eat these without the mess of larger desserts, making them practical for holiday chaos. The tarts kept well, actually improving overnight as flavors melded. Chess tarts disappeared as store-bought cookies replaced homemade holiday treats, sacrificing craftsmanship for convenience. Divinity cake took its name from the heavenly candy that inspired its frosting, a confection so temperamental that Southern bakers joked it required divine intervention to succeed. The cake layers were typically white or yellow butter cake, simple and sturdy enough to support the elaborate frosting that made this dessert famous. Divinity frosting was made by cooking sugar syrup to precise temperature, then beating it into stiff egg whites until it transformed into billowy, cloud-like peaks. The frosting was impossibly light, yet held its shape, tasting of pure sweetness with a texture that dissolved on the tongue. Humidity was the enemy, and experienced bakers refused to attempt divinity on rainy days. The finished cake looked like it was topped with fresh snowdrifts, making it a natural choice for Christmas tables. Pecans were often pressed into the frosting, adding crunch and earthiness to the sweet topping. Making divinity cake successfully was a badge of honor among Southern bakers, proof of skill and patience. Deviled eggs, made from a dozen eggs at 49 cents, became the appetizer that disappeared before the turkey was even carved. Hard-boiled eggs were halved, the yolks mashed with mayonnaise, mustard, and paprika, then spooned back into white halves, creating perfect little bites. These weren't fancy deviled eggs with capers or garnishes, just simple combinations of yolk, mayo, and tang that tasted perfect and festive. Children would sneak them off the platter while mothers were busy with final preparations, earning scoldings but rarely actual consequences because everyone understood their appeal. The eggs provided protein that kept children satisfied while waiting for dinner, preventing meltdowns from hunger and anticipation. Mothers made extra because they knew half would disappear before the meal started, planning for this theft as part of holiday tradition. The paprika on top made them look special and colorful, transforming cheap eggs into something appropriate for celebration. Pumpkin roll was the kind of dessert that made children hover anxiously around the kitchen, waiting for the moment it was sliced. It was not a pie or a cake, but a refrigerator candy, rolled by hand and packed with sweet dates, nuts, and just enough cookie crumbs to hold everything together. Families made it weeks before the holiday, storing it away in wax paper like treasure hidden in the back of the fridge. When you sliced it, the spirals of sticky fruit and crunchy nuts made every piece look like a tiny stained glass window, and the taste was just as memorable. It was sweet without being overwhelming, rich without being heavy, and easy to stretch for a crowd when money was tight. Making it was a labor of love, requiring time and patience that people no longer make space for. As store-bought candy boxes and pre-made sweets filled the shelves, the roll faded away, seen as too old-fashioned or too fiddly for modern kitchens, but back then it symbolized celebration, care, and the quiet excitement of a holiday dessert pulled from a cold shelf on a chilly evening. A little forgotten, maybe, but never undeserving of its place at the table. Apple-pan apples cooked in an iron skillet were a Thanksgiving side that felt more like a warm hug than a dish. The apples softened slowly in butter or bacon grease, sprinkled with sugar and just enough vinegar to give them a gentle tang. They turned glossy and tender, melting into a sweet and sour mixture that tasted like fall in its purest form. Families scooped them over biscuits, served them beside roasted meat, or sometimes ate them straight from the skillet because the smell alone was too tempting to resist. Children waited with forks in hand, knowing the apples had to be eaten while they were still warm and syrupy. The sound of the skillet sizzling was a kind of holiday music, familiar and comforting. It was a dish that required nothing fancy, only patience and an iron skillet seasoned by years of use. As store-bought pies and canned fillings took over, fried apples slipped off the holiday table, but their memory lingers in kitchens where the past still matters, where the sound of a spoon scraping the skillet can bring back decades in a single moment. Potato Oatmeal cake emerged from the 1950s as a frugal baker's triumph, using inexpensive oats to create something that tasted almost like a fancy German chocolate cake. Rolled oats were soaked in boiling water until soft, then mixed into a batter with brown sugar, eggs, and vanilla. The cake baked into a moist, almost pudding-like texture that needed no frosting to satisfy. But the traditional topping made it special, a broiled mixture of coconut, brown sugar, butter, and evaporated milk that bubbled and caramelized under the heat. The whole dessert cost a fraction of traditional layer cakes, yet delivered that same celebratory feeling. Oats were among the cheapest grains available, and the topping used shelf-stable ingredients every pantry contained. The cake traveled well and actually improved overnight as the flavors melded together. Oatmeal cake represented ingenuity that turned breakfast cereal into Christmas celebration. Jell-O Watergate cake emerged in the early 1970s as a playful response to the political scandal, but its roots lay in the 1950s tradition of pistachio desserts that had delighted holiday tables for decades. The cake used pistachio pudding mix to create its distinctive pale green color and nutty flavor, folded into white cake batter with crushed pineapple for moisture. The frosting was typically a fluffy mixture of whipped topping and more pudding mix, light and mousse-like in texture. The color made it perfect for Christmas, its mint green suggesting holiday festivity without the intensity of food coloring. Chopped pistachios or pecans decorated the top, adding crunch and visual interest. The cake was remarkably easy to make compared to traditional scratch cakes, appealing to busy hostesses who wanted impressive results without extensive effort. While the name came later, the flavor combination represented mid-century ingenuity. Watergate cake proved that convenience ingredients could create something genuinely delicious. Yule log pudding made from canned corn and pantry staples became the unexpected favorite that children requested by name. 2 cans of creamed corn at 18 cents each were mixed with eggs, milk, flour, sugar, and melted margarine, then baked until set like custard with golden brown edges. The pudding was sweet enough to almost count as dessert, but savory enough to belong on the dinner plate, occupying a strange middle ground that made it endlessly appealing. The texture was soft and spoonable, requiring no chewing that might slow down children eager to move on to pie. Some families added crumbled crackers or cornbread on top for crunch, creating layers of texture that made each bite interesting. Mothers loved this dish because it was impossible to mess up and could be assembled hours ahead, reducing stress during the final cooking rush. The sweetness came from the corn itself, meaning very little sugar was needed. Grape hull pie was a hidden southern treasure, made from muscadine grapes that grew thick on backyard vines and roadside fences. Families who knew this pie understood the work behind it, separating the tough skins from the pulp, simmering the insides until soft, chopping the hulls, then marrying everything back together with sugar and spice. The result was a filling with a deep purple color and a flavor both tart and sweet, richer than any store-bought fruit could ever give. This pie showed up on Thanksgiving tables in rural communities where ingredients came from the land and every harvest was celebrated. It tasted like home, like the sun-baked vines children grew up running past, like the work of hands that valued nothing more than using what you had. But as people moved away from the countryside and muscadine stopped appearing in local markets, grape hull pie nearly vanished. Few recipes survived, passed down only in small handwritten notes tucked inside old cookbooks. A dessert almost forgotten, but unforgettable to anyone lucky enough to have tasted one of those Depression-era desserts that held on in rural kitchens well into the 1960s and 1970s. Not because it was fancy, but because it worked. Families who grew up on hard times learned that beans could be more than supper. They could be turned into something sweet with enough sugar, spice, and patience. The filling was mashed until smooth, mixed with cinnamon, nutmeg, and a good splash of vanilla, creating a texture almost identical to pumpkin pie. People who tasted it for the first time often never guessed what it was made from, which was part of its charm. In communities where money was tight and gardens could only provide so much, this pie became a quiet symbol of ingenuity. Mothers served it proudly during Thanksgiving, reminding everyone that a good dessert did not require store-bought cans or expensive ingredients. Over time, As modern recipes took over and people became more distant from the resourceful cooking of prior generations, pinto bean pie faded. But those who remember it know it carried a warmth that came from making the best of what you had, especially around the holidays. Pickled creamed celery was the sophisticated cousin of other creamed vegetables, turning the overlooked stalk into something worthy of fine china and silver spoons. Cooks sliced celery on the diagonal and simmered it until tender, then folded it into rich white sauce enriched with cream and butter. Seasonings were delicate: white pepper, a touch of nutmeg, perhaps parsley for color. The celery retained gentle crunch even in the sauce, providing textural interest other creamed vegetables lacked. This was a dish for formal dinners and holiday gatherings, its mild elegance complementing rather than competing with richer offerings. Pale green and white colors added sophistication to tables heavy with browns. Some cooks topped creamed celery with toasted almonds, creating a gratin that bordered on indulgent. The dish required fresh celery at its crispest, making winter holidays the perfect occasion. Creamed celery has virtually disappeared from modern menus, a casualty of changing tastes that forgot how refined simple vegetables could become. Cake brought European Christmas tradition to American tables, its rolled sponge cake decorated to resemble a rustic forest log. The base was a thin, flexible sponge cake baked in a sheet pan, then rolled while still warm around a filling of sweetened whipped cream or buttercream. The rolled cake was frosted with chocolate buttercream, then textured with fork tines to resemble bark. Meringue mushrooms, marzipan holly leaves, and dustings of powdered sugar snow completed the woodland scene. Making a Yule log required confidence, as the warm cake had to be rolled quickly before it cracked, then unrolled, filled, and rolled again. The decoration was an art form, with skilled bakers creating elaborate forest scenes complete with edible woodland creatures. Yule log represented the intersection of baking skill and artistic vision, a cake that was as much about presentation as flavor. It connected American families to ancient winter solstice traditions celebrating the return of light. Relish made with canned fruit and coconut brought tropical sweetness to Thanksgiving tables for under $1 total. Canned mandarin oranges, pineapple chunks, and maraschino cherries were drained and mixed with miniature marshmallows, shredded coconut, and sour cream or Cool Whip, creating something between salad and dessert. The mixture was refrigerated overnight, allowing marshmallows to soften and flavors to blend into sticky, sweet perfection. Children loved how it was basically candy disguised as a side dish, while mothers appreciated how it added color and variety to heavy brown dinner plates. The salad appeared at every Thanksgiving and Christmas, becoming so traditional that its absence would have been noticed and questioned. Some families added chopped pecans or walnuts when the budget allowed, but the base recipe worked perfectly fine with just fruit, coconut, and cream. This dish represented economy and festivity combined, turning cheap canned fruit into something special. Turkey soup. Sweet potato custard was the quiet soul of Thanksgiving long before sweet potato pie stole the spotlight, a silky baked dish that tasted like home even in uncertain years. Families loved it because it was simple and comforting, made with sweet potatoes, milk, spices, and a steady hand. It came from an older style of cooking that relied on patience rather than tools. When it came from the oven, lightly set and fragrant, its sweetness came from the vegetable itself instead of handfuls of sugar. Adults swore it softened even the hardest winters, but as shortcuts and store-bought pies took over, the custard was pushed aside as too plain or old-fashioned. People forgot that its simplicity was exactly its charm. No crust, no excess, just a warm, velvety dessert that felt like a hug on a cold evening. Today it appears mostly in memories and fading recipe cards, but reviving it once is enough to understand why it mattered. Cranberry cake was the pride of Appalachian gatherings, especially around Thanksgiving. Thin layers of cake were stacked one after another, each separated by spiced stewed apples that soaked into the layers over time. It took patience to make, often shared among several women in a community, because the work was long and the reward worth it, turning the baking into a social ritual as much as a recipe. The apples were cooked down slowly, filling the kitchen with a smell that felt like the whole season condensed into a single pot. By the next day, the cake had softened into something tender, sweet, and deeply nostalgic, the layers almost melting into one another. It was a dessert that brought people together long before store-bought sweets existed, carrying the weight of family stories with every slice. Modern holidays rarely make space for a dessert that takes this much time. But those who remember it know nothing tastes quite the same, and nothing ever will. Which forgotten Christmas dessert would you bring back to your holiday table? Drop your sweetest memories in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe so you never miss more forgotten holiday flavors.